Whoever is listening, my name is Brother Muhammad Omar. I am a board member of Gardens of Peace Muslim Cemetery, as well as chair of the National Burial Council, which actually is an umbrella body for all funeral services and organizations within the United Kingdom. The purpose of today's call and conference is just to highlight what the issues we have today. Just to give you an update, COVID-19 is certainly going to be very much spreading throughout the whole country. And the estimates are that at least 80% of the population will be infected. In the first stage, a number of you might have seen my guidance as National Burial Council, where we explain to you what needs to be done when somebody passes away of COVID-19. That was based on the government's Public Health England's guidance dated the 6th of March on item number 21, where it stipulated that the body will be given to you in a body bag, but you are able to open the body bag, do the ghusl, and put it back in a body bag, and then bury it. The precaution you would need to do is please wear a PPE, meaning personal protection equipment, which consists of mainly a headgear, consists of a mask, consists of a goggle, consists of a full gown, disposable gown, gloves, where possible, even shoe covers. So if you were obliged and if you were trying to deal with that, that was what the guidance was. The guidance then changed on the 14th, which was on Saturday. On Saturday, the government brought in another regulation, which was just been published for infection and prevention control in health environment. And on page 30, point number 6.7, it clearly states that the risk from a COVID-19 person who's died is very minimal. They didn't say that, but what they said, there was no need for them to place it in a body bag. You could actually dress it. You could also do embalmment, and you can also do a post-mortem. That meant that this was no longer in the same category as we had on the 6th of March. So that meant that we could now actually, in theory, give ghusl. I then made sure that before I actually sent out my new guidance, which was sent out last night, where we said that you can give ghusl, once again, with the caveat that you can only give ghusl if you have the appropriate gear. If you don't have the PPE, you are not supposed to give ghusl at all whatsoever. The other caveat was that if there's anybody who is over the age of 60 should really not participate in this particular procedure. They should be off sync on that one. Thirdly, before we actually released the guidance, I made sure that the guidance was approved in its exact format by Public Health England to ensure that I was not saying something which was not correct. And that is why there was a delay in issuing the guidance. So therefore, the guidance which I've said is actually based on and approved by Public Health England. In addition to that, I also took advice from 5 scholars really. First one was Mufti Zubair Butt. Second is, who I think most of you will know, I've heard of. Second is Imam Yunus Dudwala, who is the head of chaplaincy at St. Bart's Trust. Third is Mufti Abdul Rahman Mangera, who acted as Zamzam Academy. Fourth and fifth are Maulana Yasin and Maulana Zubair, who are both Imams at Gardens of Peace. Also, in addition to that, I took advice from some scientific people who are fairly well known in this field. The first one is a world-renowned person by the name of Professor Alimuddin Zumla, who actually has a lot of experience in infectious disease and also has been advising on COVID-19 to WHO and other places as well. And he was knighted for his services to infectious disease, and that's the person I actually was principal. In addition, I also consulted Shuju Shafi, who was a former Secretary General of the MCB, who has also got a background on infectious disease. He's a microbiologist, he's a pathologist as well. So he also understood. Thirdly, I also took advice from Shahzad Ahmed, who is a consultant virologist at the Manchester Foundation Trust, and also a number of other people who are dealing with this particular field. So therefore, the guidance was not given in isolation. It was actually given with a full knowledge of who I was consulting. And therefore, on that basis, we issued the guidelines. There has been, and there will always be, differences of opinion. There are a number of people in this country, the scientists and biologists, whoever they may not agree with the government's position or the government's interpretation of what COVID-19 is or how we should tackle it or what it should be done. That is always going to happen. Our job was to ensure that we gave guidance to everybody based on what the government regulations were, based on what we could do, and that is the basis we actually gave the guidance on. If, for example, people are unable to carry out a ghusl because they may not have the competence, or maybe they do not have the necessary equipment, or maybe they just do not wish to, or they do not wish to bring harm to themselves, or maybe they do not have enough people to do ghusl, that is a different issue. And in which case, whatever that may be, then it is up to the individual or organizations to go to the local experts and the local ulamas to say that we have this restriction and therefore we are not able because to follow the procedures as laid down by the government, and then you make your own decisions. So this is not to say that I'm telling you do this way or there's no other way. This is a guidance to say that if you wish to give ghusl, if you take these precautions, inshallah, with the advice of the experts, there is less chances of you ever getting the COVID-19 disease posing any great threat to you. This is the advice, and this is what we have given. And this is why I also ensured that whoever was on the website or whoever was on the WhatsApp group, I gave the guidance from Public Health England so that you are fully aware what it is all entails. There is always going to be people who are not going to be comfortable in trying to deal with this because of the sheer fear factor to say, what will happen to me? And a lot of people who run funeral services, maybe a one-man operation or maybe a two-man operation, and they would probably be thinking to themselves, it's too much of a risk for myself, and I may not want to do so. So these are different. And also the scenario also has changed since last night when the Prime Minister says that the mosques he didn't say places of worship, but he gave guidance. And a number of institutions, the places of worship, from mosque, in some mosques have already closed. And we also know that ghusl facilities are held in a number of mosques. So that also poses a challenge. What is very important to do, and what is very important to note, is that if ghusl can be given safely with proper guidance, then my personal view would be you should try and do that yourself. Ask yourself the question that if it is your father or if it is your mother who has been infected, and inshallah Allah protect each and every one of us, has been infected with this particular virus, would we wish not to give them a ghusl if it was allowed to do so? Ask yourself the question. At the end of the day, our particular role is to give guidance based on government guidance and based on whatever we have been able to find from scientists. It then remains on people to then make their own judgment call with their own local scholars to say whether they can do so or not. So this is why it is important for me to say this very clearly, because there's already people trying to say, no, this is not correct, this is not correct. But it's very important for me to make this very, very clear that that is the situation which we are facing and how the guidance was set up. And this is why you should all know about it. There's no hidden agenda. I don't work for the government. Neither does any of the advisors which I've taken anything from work for the government. All these people are independent except Public Health England. So this is why it is important to ensure that this transparency is being put forward to everybody concerned. Also bear in mind that why was the change necessary from the first guidance to the second guidance? The first guidance was set on the scenario of the government when it says it was stage 1. They were trying to contain the virus. And that's why they were saying that anybody in contact with COVID-19 should make sure that they were isolated, right? Stage 2 came in where it says it was a delay phase, by which time the government recognized that the virus has already gone into the community. And that is why it is much more of a risk to catch COVID-19 from people who are alive. And this is why they went into the second phase and relaxed the law or relaxed the guidance in terms of how to handle disease. And that is why they gave the guidance that you can actually bury without a bag. This is the guidance, and that is the rationale behind it. That is why it is said that that's why the recommendation was very clear to say that anybody over the age of 60 should not participate because they were the high risk category. And that was also alluded by the Prime Minister yesterday to say elderly people to try and self-isolate because of the risk factor. Insofar as PPE is concerned, trying to obtain personal protection equipment, it is an issue. Definitely is an issue. And I have raised that with the government to say that if we wish to follow your guidelines and we wish to, as far as possible, comply to our religious requirements, you should be in a position to at least ensure that the funeral industry, or those who are involved in the funeral industry, are given that particular equipment so that they can carry out their rights. They have said that they will look into it urgently, and this request was not only made by me, it was made by several of the community. I'm talking about the normal national funeral directors, it was made by the independent funeral directors, the Federation of Burials. So all of them made the same plea to the government to say that please, you have to make sure that the basic necessity of carrying out a funeral is available, including that of burial. So this is what I wanted to share with each and every one of you so that you are aware that this is the basis on which we actually issued the guidelines. Yes, there has been some fatwas, but remember, muftis will only give fatwas on the basis of the questions you ask them and whatever information you provide them. So please ensure you are more than welcome to ask your local muftis, more than welcome to ask your local experts, and then you take a judgment call. This is something which is for each and every one of us responsibility. My responsibility as National Burial Council with my advisors was to simply give the stance and simply give the position as of today in accordance with the guidelines of Public Health England. And this is exactly what I have done. It is now up to you to decide whether you can do it or you cannot do it. But this is why it is important and clear for everybody to make an understanding of what needs to be done. There are people who are saying we should not touch the bag, the body bag, we should go ahead and bury straight away. If the new guidance, which has been issued on the 14th, which stipulates that body bags are not necessary, what will you do if the hospital gives you a body without the body bag? Because that's the guidance from the government. So are you going to insist that your hospital ensures that they give you a body bag before you're willing to carry it or not? So this is why I am only following what the guidelines are from the government. This situation is changing by the minute. And so we don't know what they will say tomorrow morning, what they will. That is why I'm constantly trying to find out as much information as I possibly can, so that I can inform my community, each and every one of you, my brothers and my sisters, that you are also in the knowledge that I'm not keeping everything for myself. I just want to share whatever knowledge I can acquire. I will just want to pass it on to you. And this is what our role is. So this is, brothers and sisters, this is why I wanted to make this particular call today so that you are aware of the position. I'm giving you the explanation behind it, but at the end of the day, there are people genuinely, because nobody knows anything more, nobody is 100% fully aware of the full impacts of COVID-19. So this is why it's always going to be something that people are going to be, not, I won't say frightened, but people are going to be nervous about. So this is why it's important for me to just try and clarify those issues with yourselves. If and when I get more guidance, I will also inform you about it. Can I also hasten to add that there have been so many rumors being circulated that bodies will be cremated and not buried. As far as I'm aware, even as of today, there has been nothing from the government which says that bodies should be cremated. Rather, to the contrary, they're trying to see how best they can help those people for whom burial is the only option. So at this moment in time, there has been nothing said, not even mentioned, that cremation is the only option. So this is something we should not try and scare people unless we have got facts to prove it from the government or from any source to say this is what the government are going to implement. That's what needs to be done. There's also been questions about that if we are trying to be isolated or we are trying to keep away from each other, how will we be able to get the necessary documents to bury somebody in a safe manner? The government are already looking into it, and I'm told that they are trying, some of these regulations can only be changed by statute, so therefore it needs to go through Parliament, and they are saying that by weekend, inshallah, the Parliament will pass it and they will make it a lot more easier. And by that I mean that what the idea is that any MCCD which is issued, which is the medical cause of death, which is issued either by a GP, either by a hospital, or either by community doctors, will go to the registrar's office by email. And the idea is that the registrar office will also email that same documentation to either the funeral director or the cemetery. I personally prefer it going directly to the cemetery, so there is an easiness of trying to return back the green form to the registrar office. The coroner, the chief coroner's position as of today is that all COVID-19 deaths, as far as possible, are natural deaths. However, because of the rules which stipulates that if a person has not seen the GP within 14 days, then that case is automatically referred to the coroner. And that is what all from the industry, not Muslim, all from the industry are explaining to the government, that you have to relax that law so that coroners are not inundated, as well as the fact that the process of burying the person who's passed away is followed as quickly as possible. So this is something which the government also is looking at. The other thing which we all will be prepared for, that there will be deaths, and there might be a lot more deaths. Nobody can tell us at this moment in time exactly how many deaths will occur. All they are saying is that the age category of 60 and over with underlying medical history are more susceptible to this disease than anybody else, and their chances of recovery are less than a young person who is healthy, who has been infected with this virus. So that is what the government's position is, and this is what the government has tried to inform everybody concerned, and all this thing is all precaution. It then takes you to the next stage, is to whether they will be able to restrict the numbers of funerals taking place, the numbers of people who are gathering at funerals and burials. Where should the Salatul Janaza take place? At this moment in time, the government is looking at it. They've only said for the time in theaters and restaurants and all that. But I do feel that going forward, this will come as a restriction. My own personal plea to everybody concerned is we should actually be proactive. And the number of people attending funerals and burials, because of the risk of a person catching virus from each other, is fairly high. It is better for us to limit the numbers which goes for funerals and for burials. That's my personal plea to people. It is entirely, once again, to yourselves and whatever the cemetery will allow. You will also take into account that there are certain cemeteries who have the specifically government cemeteries or council-run cemeteries who will have their own regulations. So you should always check with them to say how will they permit you to bury, whether it's with a box or whether it's with a shroud or whether it's any other method. But that is something you would individually need to check with your own council. It is also a time for each and every one of the community to go to your local councillors, specifically Muslim councillors, to try and ask them, what is your council doing in terms of provision for Muslim burial space, right? And that's something which you can do because it's your right, and you need to understand that all of a sudden, if you have, I'm just saying, may Allah not make it happen, but if we have 100 deaths in one small community and the amount of space is only 50, how are you going to be able to handle the other 50? So these are real issues which we should be tackling as well in the whole scenario of things. So it's just not one isolated issue. We should be thinking about all that as well. There's also the question of the elderly who are going to be asked to be isolated. How are we going to cope as a community? What provisions have we made? How are we going to be able to look after them? There is also a question which was asked when the Prime Minister yesterday said that we are thinking of isolating elderly people. You should not be in contact with them because they will be in self-isolation. We will try and make arrangements for people who come and drop the medicine, drop food and everything like that. The question which was genuinely asked is the fact that if it was my father or my mother who was quarantined or put in isolation, how would I feel if some stranger was coming to go and give food to them rather than me when doing it? Because they will have to take the same precaution as I would have to take the same precaution. So this is something which has been made as a plea to say that it is one thing trying to implement this, but the social element of it could have profound effects on the elderly as well if they are being isolated as well. That is the government's, we have asked the government to look at that aspect of it as well. That is there any flexibility? Is there any safe way so that families are still able somehow or the other to keep connections, and specifically with the elderly? There are a number of issues which are related to COVID-19, which will develop, which will keep on coming and challenge the community. What my plea to the community will be is, please let us work together. Let us not try and divide each other. This is the time when we should come together as one community, try and see what is best for the community, and try and work together, so that we may, as an ummah, work together and try and overcome what today is certainly a test which has been sent to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I pray to the Almighty that may He give us the ability to ensure that we turn towards Him and ask for forgiveness and ask for help, that may He show us guidance of how we can properly cope with what is a test to each and every one of us. Human beings, I ask for forgiveness if that is what you think we've done some wrong advice, but I just want to assure each and every one of you that we have abided by what the regulations are, and we have taken every precautions to ensure that we give the proper advice to the community. May Allah guide you, guide me, guide each and every one of us. May Allah